Hello and welcome to the Phoenix Business Forum. Our mission at the Phoenix Business Forum is to provide relevant business relationships and deliver transformative content from inspiring Phoenix leaders. My name is Presley Reeder, and I want to welcome those of you joining us online on our live stream and also our live studio audience, which we are limiting in capacity, but not enthusiasm, right? Live studio audience, good to have you with us. And thanks again for joining us online. Before we get started, I want to thank Living Streams Church for hosting us. They always help us put on a great event and get the information out to you. So thanks to Living Streams. And at the end of our interview today, we'll invite the senior pastor of Living Streams Church, David Stockton, to come up and share a few words as we close. So thank you to Living Streams. All right, so it is my privilege to be the host of the Phoenix Business Forum, and but our real stars are the guests. And if you've been tuning in over the last few months, we've had some really interesting guests, great conversations, I think, with State Senator Nancy Bartow was on. We also had economist Stephen Slavinsky from Arizona State. We had Mel Schultz, who's actually the founder of the Phoenix Business Forum and continues to help sponsor the event, which we're grateful for. If you're out there listening, Mel. And Mel is a real estate developer here in Phoenix and was also part owner in the Phoenix Suns and the Arizona Diamondbacks. So it's great to hear some of his stories. And today, I have the privilege of sitting down with another one of those inspiring Phoenix business leaders, and his name is Dr. Brent Hodges. And Dr. Hodges, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're going to have a 45-minute conversation, and then we'll turn off the live stream, and our live studio audience will get to ask some questions. So Dr. Hodges is the superintendent at Scottsdale Christian Academy, also known as SCA, which I'm going to reference as SCA throughout our interview. SCA has over 800 students, kindergarten through 12th grade, has been around for over 50 years. Yep. And we're going to learn more about the school. We're going to learn more about Dr. Hodges here today. We have here that the vision is to provide our world with highly competent future Christian leaders who are not afraid to make difficult decisions. We're going to talk about how you do that at SCA, sure. Dr. Hodges. But again, thanks again for being with us. I wanted to hear a little bit more of your bio, because I'm thinking, I'm not sure what the career path is that leads to superintendent of schools, which is a very lofty title. What is that path?
I'm not sure.
Or
either.
Your path?
Yeah, my path might have been a little different than others. I was actually an accounting major, believe it or not, and was a CPA. I was in the whole corporate tax consulting world, which I know sounds incredibly exciting and invigorating to everyone out there. But it was. I actually really loved it. I was in the public accounting arena and ended up working for a New York Stock Exchange company doing corporate tax stuff, but was volunteering at that time to teach personal finance to 7th and 8th graders.
Okay.
Just kind of on
just
a volunteer opportunity.
Punishment.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's right. But I my passion was biblical personal finance at that time on the kind of the side, and I love kids, and so I was volunteering there, and that's where the bug first came. So this was a second career for me after about 10 years in that field, and that led me to. I should mention I was a single father at that time with a 1-year-old and trying to balance a career in public accounting and raising my son. And I really felt called to that kind of spark I was feeling when I was teaching these kids. And at the same time going, well, wait a minute now. I know the financial incentives might not be there, but I could take my son to work with me every day, and the world will always need CPAs if this doesn't work out. So it's a much longer story, but that was my initial kind of leap into education. There's many little God stories along the way in there with where I ended up in the classroom and the school I was at and the age group I taught. It was just really phenomenal. God was all over it. And that's how I started teaching. I started teaching math to middle schoolers, and then eventually all levels of math up through 12th grade.
Goodness.
And so that was kind of a unique path. I ended up being the business manager for that school for a short amount of time. So the CPA
they started,
thing kinda kicked in.
They
and
saw that background and
Yeah.
jumped on it.
So exactly. You know, I'm going to be honest. I got dragged into administration initially, kicking and screaming. That wasn't my dream to be a school administrator. I kind of had an inside look into school administration at the schools I was at with the mentors that I had ahead of me and friends that I had in it. And I thought, why would anyone want to do that? I didn't really get it because it seemed really stressful. But a really good friend of mine and mentor of mine, who happens to now be the superintendent at Northwest Christian, is the one that somehow convinced me to enter into the field. And it really has been a blessing ever since. But it was through mentorships like that helped me survive, because I kind of did it backwards. I got my master's in educational leadership during my first experience as a school administrator while I was a principal. And really, that just kind of led from one scenario to the next in terms of ending up where I'm at now. This is the third school I've been at in terms of this kind of position, and it's been a learning experience along the way. And I find opportunities to fill that desire to be with the kids still, because it gets to be a little less and less. And I teach personal finance now to our juniors and seniors at SCA and things like that to kind of stay connected and in the classroom. But that's my short bio of accounting to educator to teacher to administrator.
Yeah. We could talk about personal finance a little bit. That's pretty interesting.
I
You're
love
trying to
talking about
tackle
that.
juniors and
Yeah.
and seniors and educate them on that. And you actually are an alumni of the school, right?
I went to SCA from 76 to 86 through 8th grade.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and my sister went there, and my mom worked there, and
Is that right?
my own son went there too in elementary school. So I have a long history with SCA for sure.
Yeah.
in
And
different
how long have you
capacities.
been the superintendent?
It's my 6th year.
6th year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So stuck with education, went through. So let's, I want to hear about how your leadership has evolved and changed in those different roles, but staying at the superintendent piece, I mean, honestly, the first person I pictured was Dumbledore. So I was like, I don't even know.
I can't grow a beard like that.
I don't even know what a superintendent is. I mean,
That's a
of
great
school.
question.
Like, and then I thought, I guess teacher of teachers is why I thought, Dumbledore. But then I thought, well, certainly there's got to be other ways he measures how he does his job.
Yeah.
So that's my bottom line question is, how do you know as a superintendent that you're doing your job well?
Well, everyone tells me whether I'm doing it well or not. So there's
enough.
usually nothing left to guess there. But, the truth is that kind of a teacher's really at the superintendent level, there's a lot of working with the other administrative team and executive leadership team on the mission and vision and future planning of the school, and then ensuring that the mission we have in place is going into every decision we're making. So a lot of mentoring and coaching of other administrators who really have the vast responsibility of working with the teachers in terms of, the structure is interesting at the superintendent level. The board of a school has one employee, so that would be the superintendent. And the superintendent, to answer your question, is kind of the CEO of the organization. And so a lot of the taking the big picture things and drilling it down to the minutiae of how we're actually going to accomplish it, and then really relying on the amazing people we've hired and put into place to take us through, down the road for that.
Yeah, I want to go back to
Yeah.
your comment about people giving you feedback.
Sure.
I remember when I was going out to start my own business, and I had been an employee. They said, "You're not going to have a boss anymore." That was like this
Right.
message was, well, when you go become the boss, then you don't have to deal with a boss. But what I've discovered is that all my clients are my boss.
That's right.
All their families are my boss.
Yeah.
A lot of bosses popped up in my life when I went out
Yeah.
into that role. And it sounds like, I would imagine that that's kind of similar to what you experience. I mean, you've got so many stakeholders. I'm not even going to try to list them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, parents come to mind.
Yeah, that's kind of an important one.
Right?
The students
And-
themselves.
Yeah, the students themselves. And so you're getting this feedback all the time. What is that like?
Yes, I have a lot of bosses. I remember early in my career, in the principal role, early in my administrative career, and a family member saying, those first 2 or 3 years in administration are very challenging years for anyone that's ventured into it. And I remember saying that's one of the most difficult things of getting used to is as a teacher, I thought I was doing a pretty good job and everyone kind of liked me. And I think they did, but the more you get up into administration, the more likely people are going to share with you what they're really thinking and what's really on their minds. And you have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of different viewpoints coming at you. And one of the most challenging things early in an administrative career is recognizing how to listen to all those voices and then how to make decisions based on all those different voices that are coming in. But here's the bottom line is all those stakeholders you mentioned, especially parents, if you think about it, what are parents entrusting me with or our school with? Well, if you think probably the three most important things in most people's lives, and you may have heard this before, hopefully their faith, their children, and their money. And they're entrusting all three of those things with us. So there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of passion, a lot of personal belief systems that we're meshing together. How I measure it is what we're really here to do at SCA. So of course, our academics are excellent. We focus on the model of what we're delivering, but what we're really trying to deliver is a path for these kids to learn about their faith and to walk with Christ through an educational model. And that's how we're measuring everything we do. So our mission statement is, we're trying to maximize the God-given potential of these kids, prepare them to live lives of distinction ultimately by impacting the world for Jesus Christ. And that's what I'm going to be measured on. And that's challenging because that's a very different thing to measure. And it's a lagging measure. It's people coming back sometimes many years later. And, as an example, I went to SCA. I grew up in a Christian family and went to a Christian school. I gave my life to Christ when I was 29 years old. So there are seeds we're planting now. We have kindergartners that are giving their lives to Christ. And we have kids that that aren't giving their lives to Christ yet, but these seeds are being planted that hopefully will and the Holy Spirit to do his work when the timing's right. And that's the ultimate measure we're dealing with here. So even when we're sitting around talking about what's the next level of math curriculum we're going to offer next year, we make all those really important decisions, but we always have to take it back to what that ultimate goal is.
They are entrusting a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aaron Bynum, one of our principals, and I were talking on the way over here, and he said, might as well add pets in there too, and we really just bring it all together.
The whole thing is entrusted to you. So, okay, so I want to try to draw out some examples from you as much as you're able to share. Sure. I mean, when you're entrusted with that much, it's just drama. I mean,
sure.
Drama. It's got to be all the time. And so what's a rough day at the office look like for you?
Oh, boy. That's it. Drama's a harsh word, but that's a good way to describe it. It's when you're dealing, even in our own families, when we're dealing with those types of really emotional issues. I mean, raising kids is challenging. Even when everything's going right, raising kids is challenging, and the school environment is challenging, and the way just the world has changed in the last 2 or 3 decades is challenging. So a lot of emotion And a rough day at the office can also be a very joyful day at the office. I'll put it this way. There are exhausting days in the office because you're dealing with so much emotion sometimes. Our jobs, teachers have very challenging jobs, administrators have challenging jobs. It's all about relationships. And I think that's why a challenging day is so challenging, is when you're dealing with the nitty-gritty of relationships with, I'm trying to, there's so many examples that don't even know where to start in terms of sharing, but when you're dealing with a disciplinary issue or a real serious...
A worldwide pandemic.
Oh, is one of those going on right now? Yeah.
I mean,
COVID. Yeah,
some
we've got
examples
COVID,
of things that could cause tension.
Yeah, but even personal family issues that, you know, these kids spend most of their daylight on our campus, and the emotions that go along with that. We're dealing with getting really in the personal space of families sometimes, and being just as far away as you and I are talking about how we're going to help this child walk through whatever the situation might be, with, you know, we're trying to balance on our campus justice and mercy. We're trying to balance holding kids accountable with knowing that they're loved unconditionally, and, you know, high expectations with grace. And man, that creates all sorts of fun, emotional conversations that sometimes people are on the same page on, and sometimes they're not.
You know, I want to get more into you personally later on in the interview, because I'm sitting here looking at a guy who was drawn to numbers and spreadsheets and accounting, and now is talking about emotions an awful lot. So I'm going like, does this guy run home at the end of the day and bury himself in Excel? Like, what happens?
Who told you that?
What happens to somebody that? So, but I don't want to.
Okay.
I don't want to jump to that, because you mentioned the parents' role and the school's role, and I don't think I mentioned this in the intro, but I actually have a child at Scottsdale Christian Academy, and he started there last year. This is his first year there. It's been a wonderful experience all around, just phenomenal for him, for us as parents. But since I have the superintendent here with me, this is where the question really, right?
It's hard-hitting questions are coming.
No, but I wonder how the school thinks and talks about that relationship between parent stakeholders and your role as administrators or teachers. And it's not just when it comes to discipline, but I would say character development. Can you maybe there's an example? How do you interact with the parents? Maybe what's your hope in the way that you can interact with parents around that?
Well, there's no secret it takes a huge amount of trust, and it's why I think making that decision as a family of what the best school fit is for your family and for your child is so important. It really helps that we all have a foundation we're basing this all on. We're a covenant model Christian school, and we're doing our best to follow the model of the Word of God. So it's a Christian worldview is what we're basing everything on. So we come with this common foundation together. Now that doesn't erase differences of opinions or emotions or...
Right. Christians have never argued about anything.
Yeah, in the history. Yeah. So we're still a school full of humans and of sinners, and we are, mucking our way through all that stuff. But that foundation is there. So if you look through our handbook or our kind of guidelines for community living at SCA, that's where we're going to take it back to, the Matthew 18 principle of how we address concerns with each other. One thing we've never denied is that no one knows your child better than you. And so we can't do this without a partnership with the families. And the way it works the best is when there's a healthy partnership. So we, for lack of a better word, demand that. Like that has to happen for the child to truly grow and blossom in the way the family and the school wants them to. That has to be a partnership, even in the way we conduct perhaps differences of opinion. Like if there's a disciplinary situation And we have to come to terms on that. And we're a school, so ultimately we're going to have the final say in the decision we're making with the child. But it's about that partnership. And 99 point whatever percent of that time, that works really well. And sometimes it doesn't, to just be really honest. And sometimes we have to have that conversation that either the parent has to have it with us or we have to have it with them, going, for this child to really benefit, this partnership has to be really healthy. And so we need to get on the same page for that to happen, or change pages. I mean, it's a tough discussion that fortunately we don't have to have very often. And that would be a really challenging day at the office if one of those had to occur. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you used the word demand in that. I mean, you're actually demanding a responsibility on the parents' side,
Well, and likewise
holding
back to
yourselves
us.
accountable to it as well.
Yeah.
The school, the school experience I had growing up, the school experience that I think my kids have had, those words don't come to mind, or didn't come to mind until I started interacting with the administration at SCA, where there was a demand for a partnership, a demand for accountability. Do you think that's a function of it being a Christian school, a private school? Is it just the leadership in a school and it can happen anywhere?
Here's the part of it of being a Christian worldview, Christ-centered school, is we don't have to say those words. We demand that or I don't think the parents have to come in and communicate those words, because hopefully they feel when they step on campus for that first tour, and then when their child starts to experience a year at SCA, what they're going to experience is people that are surrounding them that are really passionate and care about them. And that's going to come out of that relationship I'm talking about. Our goal is not to make sure, not solely, to make sure these kids come in and are ready to enter the economy. They need to enter the economy, but our goal is not for them to be a cog in the economy. Our goal is whatever they decide to do to get out there in the world system that we have, in the economic system that we have, is to impact the world for Jesus. And they can't do that unless they're surrounded by peers, of course, but adults who they know love and care for them and are ready to pour into them. And part of that is expecting a lot out of them, but then right there to catch them when they fall and stumble and help them. Like that journey and that walk, as they're discovering their own faith, is ultimately what we're here to do. And so when the students feel that, the parents are going to feel it, and then the partnership just takes root from there. And that's what I felt as a parent at SCA. That's what we're striving for. I think that's what most parents feel and why they keep coming back to SCA. And when that breaks down on occasion, then that's where those conversations have to be had to get it back, on the rails, but for one reason, not so your life's easier or my life's easier, but because that's how the child's going to benefit.
Okay, let's go back to you.
Uh-oh.
As a leader, that transition, I think it's probably fair to say that some of our audience has either been through that same type of a transition from, in this case, it would be teacher to administrator, teacher to a teacher of teachers, or they're looking at making that leap. Can you touch on some of the differences? You mentioned the idea that you have to deal with more feedback. You mentioned the being comfortable with that or handling that. And it's particularly striking going back to you being an accountant before and now being in such
Feeling a really accounting stereotype going, no, I'm just kidding.
Such a relational role now. You said where everything depends on relationship.
Sure.
A lot of individual performers have a hard time making that transition.
Yeah.
How did somebody with the accounting wiring make that transition, and do you have any suggestions for other people who are trying to make that?
There's a lot in that question. Um, actually really enjoyed my career in accounting. I wasn't looking for a reason to get out, and I think the part I enjoyed the most was the relational aspect of it, was the working with clients. And I didn't have the opportunity to work with kids, but I really enjoyed the interaction with the peers. And in public accounting, you're working ridiculous hours and you're there till 1 a.m. sometimes. And that younger crowd at the time, I was younger in my career, and there was something invigorating to me about that aspect of it. So do I love spreadsheets? Yes, I admittedly don't get to spend as much time
I was
in my
going to drag that out of
Excel
you
spreadsheets as I used to. And if anyone ever is working on a spreadsheet, I'll gladly force myself in to make recommendations. But the relational part, I just think that's where God calls me to be, is I want to be around people and working with people. And so that part didn't feel like a 180 to me, to be honest.
Okay.
It's prior to going into education, I volunteered a lot in junior high ministries and things like that. So I already knew I loved kids. And so in terms of advice to other people, I think it's just to find out what really makes you tick and what your passion is in, and follow that. And if I told you my intention was never to go into administration, God just opened doors and closed doors for me to put me wherever he intends me to be. And sometimes those are really challenging places to be in, as I'm sure most people experience. But I just trusted his call. I fought against it sometimes, but trusted his calling. And I'd just say, and not to take us back to personal financial stuff, but that background really helped me, because it helped prevent me, this is probably getting on the personal side, but from making some poor financial choices in my younger life that would have prevented me from making a career switch like that. Because I don't know if anyone's informed anyone out there, but education can not be the highest paying field, and it's a struggle for teachers to sacrifice. The beauty of seeing a Christian school like ours is, we do actually have a very competitive pay scale and compete with some of the best out there, but that doesn't change the fact that it's not a lucrative career, and the people that are in there with your kids and in the classroom, they better be there because it's a calling and it's a passion for them, because those kind of incentives aren't really there anymore. But
Right, yeah, you follow your passion, but it's got to pay the bills.
It's got to pay the bills.
Yeah. Especially if you're responsible for paying those bills.
That's right. Yeah.
You mentioned that it's changed over the past few decades.
Yeah.
Right?
Significantly, yeah.
I think you said it in the context of education, just changing.
Yeah.
How has it changed?
Probably the most significant way is really obvious, and that's with technology. And that's in a really, really powerful and good way, and in a really, really scary way too. The technology, I've been in it about 20 years now, and even since I started, there was technology out then. There's some smart boards and things out, but my first classroom was an overhead transparency. That was my technology I had in my classroom for the first couple of years. So the tools that are available,
those were great.
Aren't they great? Yeah.
Those overheads. Did you love overheads when you first?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Some sort of power you have with just writing things. But the toolbox, I guess I would say, that the teachers have, like, your ultimate goal is to make learning fun and
Right.
exciting and capture the kids' interest so the learning isn't dreadful to them. They have so many more tools now than we've ever had. But the kids have in their hands these devices that can be very damaging too. So I think what we really focus on is technology isn't the objective. It's not the ends. It's a means to the end. It's a tool in the toolbox. And so we're not Luddites. We do use a lot of technology in our classrooms, but we try to reinforce using them in the right way. But the other way it's drastically changed is just the distractions that these kids have. They are, I believe it has affected attention span, and there's such a distraction that it makes it very challenging for schools to keep that distraction at bay as much as possible. So it's like most things in moderation, it's a blessing and a curse.
Huh.
But that's how it's changed most drastically. What hasn't changed is the purpose of education and the purpose of educating kids and pouring into kids. And I'm going to go back to it again, and having relationships with kids. So the kids are only going to learn from teachers that they trust and have relationships with. That hasn't changed, but the tools and the ways we go about it are vastly different.
And the kids have changed somewhat, but like you said, they're more distracted. That's not necessarily at their core. They haven't changed.
Right.
I mean, do you still like kids after 20 years? I mean,
I like them more
I
than I ever
didn't like
have.
middle school kids to start with, so I don't have a comparison. I don't have
That's
a starting
hilarious.
point on that. You said you liked them.
Well,
and-
I'm kind of weird. Middle school were my favorite years growing up, and I don't think a lot of people feel that way.
Oh, as
'cause
a
they-
child,
as a
you
child,
enjoyed junior high.
I love junior high.
Yeah.
More than high school, more than elementary school. And my first teaching job was in middle school.
Uh-huh.
I love that, like awkward, trying to figure out who they are. They're cracking voices. Everything's like just they're growing into their selves, and I love that age.
You love it.
Yeah.
Great. I'm glad there are people
a lot
out
of
there
people
who
going,
do.
"Better you than me
Yeah,
now."
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as a parent, and seeing you, other teachers, not just at SCA, but others who've had influence over my kids, and particularly right now in that formative middle school age, I am on my knees thanking God that there are people who like middle school kids and who love them, want to build relationship with them.
Well, we do get to send them home at the end of the day, though. You have to remember that.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm grateful that, and it sounds like you've been able to maintain that type of passion for the kids over the years.
Yeah, what I find is the more I'm out of it, it's probably obvious as superintendent, I'm going to have less and less time in the classroom than I did as a teacher, principal, and such. But the more I crave it, and the more I look for small opportunities to get back in, which is good for a variety of reasons. And one is to continually remind me how hard these teachers have it, because being in front of 20 or 25 of them is not an easy task.
Yeah, right. So you're an influencer in a lot of ways with these kids, and you get to pour into them. Oh, and I'm thinking about all of our audience here, who are managers, leaders, business owners, our online audience. They're in leadership roles, management roles. And it just struck me that if you can influence a middle school kid, you can influence anybody. I mean, you the world is your oyster. If you can handle that type of a role and responsibility, I feel like it's just, it's just the way I feel. But I wonder if you can translate that for our audience when you think about how do you motivate, and for these folks, it's going to be employees who maybe are distracted, awkward, their voices are cracking, right? Whatever. They're like middle school kids in some cases, or whoever they're trying to lead that they're having a challenge with. Is there a transferable skill there where you can give us some insight into moving them in the right direction?
I mean, I suppose. I think that teaching is an art form, and I think more and more in the educational field, people have tried to frame it into a formula. And I think we have to be really cautious of that the more the field kind of studies analytically what works and what doesn't work, you could get down to the point where you're just starting to script things and check these boxes, and that actually backfires and doesn't work, because it does come down to connection again. So I think you have to give teachers the framework. Obviously at SCA we have curriculum maps and expectations of standards we need to meet, but then within that framework, giving teachers the freedom to exercise their art form, because no two teachers are exactly alike. Some are, wired like me, they're type A, and they do want to check the boxes and make sure we do all this, and others are the complete opposite. And a lot of different learning styles out there for kids, and you got to be able to allow some freedom while still achieving the objective. So part of it, I think, with teachers is making them feel not too boxed in, like use these skills God gave you, how, and of course, training them in all the different methods there are out there, but then the goal's the same. How do we influence this child, or how do we get this lesson to be memorable to this child, and try, you know what, I guess I'd say the freedom to take risks. Take healthy risks in the classroom, and if it doesn't work the first time on a way you're trying to teach a certain subject or something, then scrap it and try a different way, but give that kind of freedom and that risk-taking in the classroom, that flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, you keep talking a lot about the why you do this, and less about the how it gets done. It sounds like giving people some freedom to focus on
Sure.
letting them do it their way.
Yeah.
We've got maybe 7 to 10 minutes left on our live stream. Let's talk about the future.
Okay.
When you're in a CEO role,
Yeah.
there's an expectation that you look out ahead, around the corner, down the bend,
Yeah.
whatever metaphor you want to use. But future of education, and I want to hear about the future of these kids, what you want to see them do. And you've touched on
Okay.
what's most important about alumni of SCA,
Yeah.
pursuing Christ, influencing the world for Christ. So let's start with the future of education. More technology?
Just education at large.
However you want to narrow it is fine.
There's the direction things are going in a lot of ways is more so now, even with COVID, is online. And I feel pretty strongly that, and SCA actually will have an online presence and is developing some, especially for the high school, some online options for classes. But I feel really strongly that that's not the future of education.
That's something that you did during COVID that you think will continue.
No,
but it's not
there's
the
what we
future.
did during COVID, which is just remote learning, to be able to kind of tap into the classroom. Totally separate from that. A lot of schools, including ours, are developing an online presence, similar to like what you might see in colleges, where it'll give seniors some flexibility, or high schoolers flexibility to take more options of classes, and they might have a class or two that's really kind of an online class.
Okay.
But the future of education going too far that way, I think, is scary, and I think we should watch out for that, because I still firmly believe that human interaction is where a lot of the learning takes place, and that being in the classroom with the teacher, with peers, co-laboring and learning together, and even student-led learning and discussions is huge, that you just can't replicate identically on a computer screen. And so I can see that being, because of that, schools like ours being more attractive, because I think schools in the public school arena and such are going to go more and more to an online kind of option for families. So that concerns me a little bit. Again, using technology as a tool, but not as a replacement, or not as the objective, I think is key.
And you've gotten a little taste of that with COVID. Have you seen any of the negative impacts that you are concerned about for the future? Have you seen any of that during the year?
Not so much academically, but I think there's a significant loss socially. That's probably obvious when you think about it, that you have that. So much of the learning that goes on in a classroom has to do with your peers and the kids that are around you. And I think I actually think it's really sad that kids across the nation and a lot of environments have not been in school for a year now. We're blessed that we've been able to keep our school open this school year, and I think it's important for kids to be together and be learning together. So, but future of education as a whole, I think you're going to see a much broader online presence. I think you're even going to see parents considering. There's always been public, private, charter, homeschool options. I think you're going to see that fifth option being discussed in the same conversations about what's best for my child, and I think that environment can be a best fit for particular children, but I don't think it should be the way that we go.
And then my last question on that is just related to the teachers. Same question for them as they look at the future. Are they expressing excitement, fear, some other emotion about the future as teachers?
You know, I have our teachers that I can, take out.
Sure.
That's my sample size at SCA, and then what we see going on out there. And the reason we've been able to stay open and give these kids school this year on campus is because our teachers want to be on campus. They want to be teaching in person. And I know that's different than what you hear a lot out in some of the other arenas of they're kind of enjoying this or liking this. It's very hard. It's very challenging to teach online, but it's considered another option. And I think from our teachers, I think if you polled them or talked to them, they'd say, no, please make sure we're open next year. Please make sure we're not online. But they're in it, again, for similar what I described at the beginning of this interview. Our purpose and the reason we're in this field is a calling greater than the curriculum, and I think that human interaction is it's critical for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's critical everywhere. I think we've all learned a little bit about that. Maybe took some of that for granted.
Sure.
Even I think one of the despite the amazing experience my son has had at the school, it almost feels like he's had an experience apart from us in some ways, because some of the other activities that parents would have typically been involved in or the community that you've built at the school hasn't been available.
Right.
And there's a loss in that
big loss
for the whole family,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think you're getting I don't know if that's the kind of feedback. Some of the things you hear, it's, well, no, it's great. We can go anywhere as a family. We can be gone and we can still be at school. But are people generally hungering for the school community to be what it was pre-COVID?
Yeah, and that's not just parents, teachers and administrators alike. Or we're blessed to have been open all year, but it's not the same. There's so many community events we haven't been able to do, mission trips we haven't been able to go on. Just on-campus gatherings where we talked about the partnership and how important that is, that makes that more challenging because the parents haven't been on campus to keep our campus safe. We've had very few adults on our campus, and it's not the same. We're looking very much forward to that changing very soon, all things working out and getting back to that community. But the community's critical, and it's been a hole. There's been a real hole this year because of that.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear people are excited to dig out of it.
Yeah.
I know we are.
Good.
Excited to move in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we're done with the live stream. We'll end on that. That's
Great.
the future. Community, I think, is a great message to end on. And for those of you out there who have had, I know you've all been impacted in whatever community, whether it's in your school or in your neighborhood or at your place of business. I guess that I'll just say that's a hope we have for you too, is that you'll be able to get back into that community some way, in whatever way you feel is safe, to just begin to experience those benefits that come from being in community. So I like ending on that for the live stream, Dr. Hodges.
I enjoyed it.
I will say this, I really appreciate the soberness, if I could say, with which you approach your role as superintendent. I think there's something settling about your presence, and even messaging that you've sent us as parents, and then sitting with you today. It's very reassuring when you're handing over so much of your life to somebody, to know that the person in charge is not sitting lightly with that, that they're really using their judgment as best they can. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing it with our audience. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So with that, we're going to wrap up our live stream. I'm going to invite Senior Pastor David Stockton up to close things for us. And I did want to mention again that we have a live studio audience, and they are able to join us by invite at this point. We're we're very interested in having you join us. If you're interested in joining, you can reach out and we can get you scheduled to attend one of our interviews. We're hoping to expand to bigger crowds in the fall. We're excited about that, being fully back in person and online with bigger crowds. So you can look for information about that. Go check out our YouTube page. You can see all of those previous interviews that we've done and the others that are coming up on the first Wednesday of every month. And actually, we already have one scheduled for next month, and her name is Lynn Sue Cooney. Lynn Sue was a broadcaster here in Phoenix for many years. She's now in a leadership role with Hospice of the Valley, so we'll have lots to talk about with her. She may just interview herself because she's a very experienced interviewer and broadcaster. So we'll see how that one goes, but I think you'll enjoy it. So tune in. It's the first Wednesday of each month. You can join us. And again, thanks for being with us. And now Senior Pastor David Stockton.
All right. Well, thank you, Presley. Thank you, Dr. Hodges, as well. This was not an advertisement for Scottsdale Christian Academy by any means, just in case you were wondering. But really, we just wanted to educate those that are in the business community, one, about, an organization, a nonprofit organization, or Scottsdale Christian Academy, but also as you are trying to figure out how to navigate education for your own self, for your family, and all of that. And with that being said, I'm just going to kind of pray a blessing over you and your family, and then we'll be done. So Heavenly Father, I thank you for all those tuning in. We do thank you that you do want to educate us. You've given us a mind, you've given us a heart, you've given us an environment, you've given us a desire to know and questions that come. And I really do pray, Lord, that you would help us here in America, particularly here in Phoenix, to do a really good job of educating the next generation. Lord, I pray that you would guide our school leaders, you would guide our teachers, you would guide our parents, as all of us have this responsibility to raise up a generation that can be more competent and more courageous than we are and have been. And the issues are great these days. The ideologies going around, the virus is going around. Lord, there's a lot of challenge to both our health, mentally and physically. And so we just pray for your guidance. And I pray that right now you would just even deposit in every parent, you just deposit something in their mind that they can do to help guide their child, to guide their family, to further education and to knowing you, and then to knowing about the world that you created, and that we would take good care of it, and that we'd learn to love one another, and we would honor you in everything we do. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.